Thank you all for joining us today for our session around optimizing identity governance. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to engage with Rivanti. Rivanti is a Microsoft partner that has a team packed with expertise in all things Microsoft. The team at Rivanti is ready to help organizations deliver a more collaborative, more productive, and more secure experience. A few housekeeping items for today's event. This is a live event that is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with each of you at the end. If you have any questions on any of the content presented today, feel free to enter them into the chat, and our team will take action to help answer them. Our speakers for today, Roman and Yesai. These two gentlemen have been working within the IT sector for over 20 years and have been executing Microsoft initiatives for organizations of all sizes since the inception of Microsoft Cloud. They come loaded with a deep wealth of knowledge around Microsoft's tools and its impact on end users. And I know for a fact you will all walk away with more insight on identity governance by the time this is over. All right, enough from me. Roman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shane, and thanks everyone for joining today's presentation. So first of all, before we dive deeper into identity governance, let's set the stage in terms of what is actually identity governance as part of Microsoft Entra family of products. Identity governance is really a natural extension of what Microsoft has been doing for quite some time in Azure Active Directory with all the foundational and advanced capabilities around identity lifecycle management, as well as security. As you might know, Azure Active Directory is a cloud solution and really the backbone to all Microsoft 365 workloads. So that means identity governance is cloud governed management solution, which applies to cloud workloads, as well as extending the capabilities to on-premises assets and on-premises resources. For the purpose of today's conversation, we're going to focus on cloud side of identity governance. Identity governance specifically helps organizations to look at who has access or who should have access to which resources within the environment, but also what are users doing with that access that is provided to them to different applications or different resources. And do we also have effective controls in place to make sure if organization gets audited, those controls are properly working, and from compliance standpoint, organization meets those compliance requirements. From the strategy standpoint, as it pertains to Microsoft's identity governance strategy, and Isai, please feel free to change the slide, but from the strategy standpoint, Microsoft focuses the solution on a couple of different things. Obviously, as mentioned, identity management or Microsoft Identity Governance is a cloud-based solution. And one of the important topics that is very important for organizations is self-service, and really to help businesses with easy ways to request access to resources so that if, for example, users need access to specific applications, the organization can empower those users to be more self-service driven. For example, going through My Access portal, requesting the access to application, probably providing some business justification in terms of why they need access and things like that. So the whole idea here is to make it easier for your users so that they don't have to go through a process of submitting a ticket to service desk, waiting for someone to pick up the ticket, to provide the access to application, and really providing that auto-driven mechanism for things like approvals, rejections, to specific requests to access the application and things like that. So additionally, identity governance provides focus on analytics. Obviously, with Azure Active Directory getting a vast number of signals on daily basis, those analytics help with reporting and helping the organization to, again, achieve that level of compliance and achieve greater degree of identity governance. Additionally, within identity governance, it's important to mention that Microsoft makes different APIs available so that partners and customers can connect to Azure Active Directory to also provide some additional advanced capabilities and build upon what's available in Azure AD. From the standpoint of automation, obviously, by automating employee and non-employee onboarding and offboarding processes, or delegating access reviews to the appropriate business groups, and leveraging insights to speed that decision-making process, basically any organization can ensure users are productive, security risks are addressed, and really removing that IT burden and truly unlocking that governance at scale. And the pillars you see on the screen, obviously, those are essentially encompassing under the identity governance solution from application access standpoint, things like assessing the access, assessing the request, preventing unneeded access or unnecessary access, enforcing those policies, but also long-term being able to govern those different scenarios and use cases that you may have. When we talk to our clients, there are specific scenarios that they typically ask us about, right? So as mentioned, automating employee onboarding and offboarding, and really providing that more efficient mechanism around, having users created and/or even providing appropriate access across applications in scenarios where users may change their department, they may change their roles within the organization, and to make sure that the process is automated. And also making sure that administrative permissions in all clouds for all users and workloads are not excessive, and there isn't extra exposure in cloud hosted resources. And also finally giving employees of business partners only the access that is absolutely needed. So basically having that understanding of least privileged access and really providing that type of automated mechanism to make sure that only needed access is provided. So with that said, I would like to pass the mic to Yesai to kind of dive deeper into the technology and also empower the conversation with some technical demos as well. Thank you very much, and Yesai, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roman, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're really excited to have everybody here. We're looking forward to continuing our conversation on identity governance. So I'm really excited to present this to the team. So we'll start off by talking about what are the steps to governance, right? In order to establish proper identity governance, there are some prerequisite steps in order to kind of get that going. Number one is obviously getting all our users and bringing all our users into Azure Active Directory. So that's very, very important. And we'll kind of talk about that when we talk about automating the user provisioning into Azure Active Directory. Connecting all your users to the applications they need, right? So another pillar is making sure we integrate all of our apps with Azure Active Directory in order to establish proper identity governance. We want to make sure all our users and all our applications are all integrated and tied into Azure Active Directory. And obviously delegating, managing access lifecycle for users. We'll talk a lot about also lifecycle workflows and how to automate a lot of those processes, bringing a lot of automation and options using lifecycle workflows, how to automate that onboarding and offboarding of users. That's really important. There's a lot of analytics, a lot of reporting, a lot of data also involved. One thing about identity governance is it's not necessarily, it's also a way for you to make it easier for your users to access the resources that they need, but you'll also have the capability to review reports and analytics on what's being accessed, who's accessing what, because that's very important, and that's very important part of identity governance. So we'll kind of talk through some of that as we kind of move ahead. So the Microsoft Entra Identity Governance Suite has different features and products that we'll be talking through. I'm really excited to kind of show you some of these. I'm really excited about a lot of these because I've been really deep diving into a lot of different areas, and there's a lot of great enhancements that Microsoft is updating pretty much on a weekly basis. They're adding newer and newer features on all of these, and I've had the opportunity to work with also customers to deep dive in these areas. They've actually reached out to us through Ronti to help them deploy some of these things, specifically in entitlement management, setting up proper access reviews and access certification, setting up these lifecycle workflows. Lifecycle workflows are, they recently went actually general availability. They were in public preview. So it allows you to do a lot of the automation of onboarding users, offboarding users. You can also run your custom task extensions to integrate with your third-party applications, do a lot of tasks that you didn't think you can do. So Microsoft has really built this suite of products to be able to bring it all together and kind of give you that identity governance as part of Microsoft Entra. So we'll talk through. I have some demos I'm excited to show you to kind of articulate the end user journey, right? What it looks like, right? You might ask, well, you know, all of these things are amazing. They're great to hear, but we also kind of want to see what it looks like for our end user. What are they actually experiencing? So we'll kind of walk through in the demo. So key reasons, obviously, I talked earlier about, you know, automating user provisioning, right? Why that's important, you know, naturally, is first and foremost, eliminating any manual processes, right? Reducing human error, right? I know there's a lot of, you know, there's definitely a lot of organization that still there's a lot of manual processes, right, involved. When you're provisioning users, when you're creating users, when you're bringing them into your organization, having, you know, that manual process, you know, let's create tickets. Let's have somebody follow up on the ticket. Let's have somebody action on that ticket. You know, there's a lot of those components of user provisioning that we want to eliminate, right? We want to be in this modern world of automating as much as we can. And obviously, you know, once you bring all your users and you automate that user provisioning, you also automate the deprovisioning, right? You want to have a way of the system automatically deprovisioning a user without necessarily relying upon a manual process to do that. And of course, managing user access to apps using different policies naturally. So once you bring all your users, you bring all your apps, that's where you create, and we'll talk about it when we talk about entitlement management and access packages. We kind of bring that all in, we create the necessary packages, and we allow users to access the resources that they need in their hands. You as an administrator and as an organization, you set those resources, the policies necessary, and then you let the end users kind of be able to request access as they need it. And we'll review that. There are a lot of different scenarios. There's some scenarios to automate that assignment. So you automatically assign these resources and these packages to users. Some cases you want to restrict who can request access, right? And we'll talk about those scenarios as we kind of move ahead. Here we portray like a scenario of onboarding from HR. So let's assume you have an HR-driven user provisioning, something like a Workday. You know, you create all your users. That's your source of authority where all your users are housed. From there, user provisioning provisions them into Azure Active Directory. If you have an on-premise Active Directory environment, from there it's provisioned into on-premise Active Directory. And once you get all your users into Azure Active Directory, then you could see there's a cycle, there's the life cycle, workflow cycle, where you can have automation to automatically enable these accounts. So as an example, you bring their employee hire date, right? So you pre-create these users based on their employee hire date, and we'll look at that as an example. Basically, you create that user, they come in as a disabled account, and then you have an automated system that goes in and at a certain time generates like a temporary access pass and emails the manager for that user the details for logon. And then on day of the hire, the account is automatically enabled for that user. A welcome email is sent. The user grabs the temporary access pass from the manager as an example and automatically logs into the system. As you see, this whole flow happen kind of in an automated process, but there are definitely steps to kind of get to there. So user provisioning is very important because you want to get all your users into Azure Active Directory so you can leverage all these amazing tools and services that are available. So I talked a lot about entitlement management. As you can see, I have a lot of passion for it because there's a lot of great things you can do with entitlement management. So to kind of give you paint a picture, you have a set of resources. So your resources are like groups, our teams, can be applications, or can be SharePoint sites. So what you do first is you create a catalog. You create a catalog of these different resources. So you can segment your catalogs. You create different ones depending on how you want to group these. And then from there, you create what's known as an access package. An access package is a group of resources for that package. Now, the resources can be groups, so you can get really creative, and as users request access to this package, they get automatically added to a specific group, and then in turn, that group can go around and do other things like accessing applications, things like that, right? You can also add them to different teams. So great examples are you have users who are, say, part of the marketing team, and they come in, and I actually have that example where a marketing employee comes in and is not aware of what team they need to have access to, right? They're not sure, they need to ask around, they need to possibly look at some articles, and then they need to ask and possibly put in a ticket. As you can see, there's a lot of going around, and the user's kind of sitting there day one, not necessarily sure how to access what. So access packages allow them to request it. Once they request it, you as an organization already specified, hey, the marketing team should be able to be in all 3 or 4 of these teams. Once that's set up, the user requests access, they'll get it, pretty much the access granted automatically, and they're off and running, right? You also have scenarios where you might request approval. So you might not necessarily want somebody to request the package without making sure that it's approved by, say, a manager or another organization member. So you have that. You also want to have that as part of it as well. So we'll show you both of those scenarios when I actually go through the demo. I have both scenarios in that demo, so we'll kind of talk through. So as we kind of move ahead, so this kind of summarizes the access request, the workflow, and approvals that I talked about. So again, there's different ways to set up entitlement management. You create different packages, and there's self-service ways. There's automated ways. You might have a specific team. You want to make sure that everybody in the company. So as a perfect example, you have like an all-company team site, right? You want to make sure every employee is part of that. Well, you create a package and you assign it to all the users. And what happens is day one, that once the user is enabled, they're in the system, the package will automatically apply and they'll get access to the team. The great part about this is the same way, if let's say, a week from now, you wanted to create a team site and you want to make sure like you created a separate team site or a group that you want everybody to part of, instead of going through to the group and creating like a dynamic group and then adding the users manually, having a script to add the users to these groups, and then go and assign it to the application. As you can see, there's a lot of disconnected parts here. And as an organization, where identity governance comes in is you're not entirely sure who has access to what. That's the important part that brings the power of identity governance. Not only do you have the capability to automate these and allow users to access what they need, you're able to govern that access, right? You're able to really have control of it and know who has access to what, because that's very important. If you have an auditing or you want to audit, okay, I have this application and I'm not entirely sure who has access, right? And we'll talk about access reviews, right? You can review the access, right? You can see things like, oh, this users have access, but they haven't logged in 30 days. Or why do they still continue to need access? So that's where the governance capability, and that's where we really talk about identity governance. That's what brings in the power of that identity governance in the picture. So we'll kind of talk through some of that and we'll demo what that looks like for the end user. So here's kind of the admin side of what access packages kind of looks like. It kind of articulates, and I'm going to quickly pause here to kind of show you the different features. So we have the access packages, as I talked about. As you can see, this organization has quite a lot of different access packages, and they can be used for different purposes. Some can be just strictly an access package to request access to a group. And in turn, that group will control some other permission to say, let's say you have a set of resources or set of virtual machines as an example, depending on your organization. I mean, you can use that for a lot of different purposes naturally. You might have a specific application, so there's a lot of different use cases and reasonings for that. You have reporting. This is amazing. You can see, you can go to each access package. You can look at the access package and see who it's assigned to currently. And let's say you want to modify that, right? Let's say the marketing team, you onboarded a new app, right? you add a new app into the system and you integrate it with Azure Active Directory, you might ask, okay, so how do I deploy it? Well, you can always go to the app and just add members to the app, and then you're good that way. However, you can't really govern it, right? You can't control that access. You want to be able to govern that access end to end, right? If you did it manually, you have to go to the application, you have to manually add the user to that application. And then let's say you wanted to, in 30 days, you wanted to remove that access, right? Let's say you wanted time-based. Well, you have to put a reminder to yourself, say, oh, in 30 days, I'll go remove it. Well, what happens with that? We all actually get busy, we're gonna forget, and people are gonna have the access to things that they still don't need. So that's where the governance capability comes in. With the access package, you could specify, okay, in this package, I want them to only have access for, say, 30 days only. And after 30 days, either expire it or, and we'll talk about this shortly, is access review. So the user will be able to review their access and recertify that they actually still need access. You can also get really creative. A lot of organizations have come to Ivanti to really help them with this, to really develop this, right? Really kind of take their use cases. The important part of all of this is taking your use cases and really looking at what you're doing with access today. How are you, what type of controls do you want to put in place? Let's help design that for you. Let's create a package to make sure that it meets your needs, right? Because there's no real one set solution. You know, you might, every organization has different needs. So it's important that it's created based on your needs for your organization. So here I have a pre-recorded demo. I'll kind of talk through. So I wanted to kind of paint the picture as I play the video here. So here we have a scenario. User Alex, in this case, started day one. They logged into their My Apps portal, and you access that by going to myapps.microsoft.com. And we created app launchers for them. This basically gives them a nice dashboard. You organize your apps. You can get really creative here as well, and we can gladly talk further on this in separate conversation, to basically create groups of different applications. So depending on your use case, you can segment your apps in a different way. So we have them all grouped here. So as Alex is going through his apps and looking at seeing, okay, what do I have access to? Alex finds that, you know, he was told that he needs access to the employee portal. However, he really doesn't have access here. He doesn't know, he doesn't see that access. So he's kind of not sure what the next step is. What do I need to do to get access to the employee portal? And basically, talking to the team, they mentioned, oh, there is an access package where you can actually go and automatically request access to this access package. So as you'll see shortly, Alex will actually go to myaccess.microsoft.com and we'll find that access package and we'll request access. And then you'll see the flow of what that looks like. So here, Alex went to the access package. As I mentioned, they found the employee portal access package. They said, oh, I think this is what I need. So they went ahead and requested access. You know, obviously they provide a reason and justification. The reason for this is for governance, right? So when you go back as administrators and you see why people requested access, you can actually see this, right? So they can put in a justification, they could put in a reasoning. They might have a specific reason, right, to access something. So as you can see, Alex went ahead and restricted it, got a notification, hey, your request to add is being processed. So what does that mean that it's being processed? That means that somebody is, the system automatically submitted it for you and it says it's pending approval. So the manager, in this case, Alex as manager, is Adele. So Adele is the manager and they get a notification. Now, the notification to Adele, sometimes there might be a delay, you know, a minute or so. It's not really a long delay, but 30 seconds to a minute before actually the automatic email shows up for Adele to approve that access. So you'll see here shortly, Adele will get that email. And also Adele has access to the same My Access portal. And in that My Access portal, they have a way of approving it automatically. And you'll see as the move ahead, Adele will go to the My Access portal. We'll be able to see that request. We'll see the business justification. We'll see the details that Alex put in the notes, and we'll be able to automatically approve that access. So you'll see shortly kind of how that works and how quick things happen, right? So they see, okay, request history. will look at the approvals and says, oh, you have a request from Alex, and you have a due date by August 2nd in order to review it. So Adele goes in and says, okay, let me review it. And coincidentally, as you can see, I wanted to also show you that the email did come in to request it. So this email is more of a notification. You don't have to depend on that email, because if Adele goes to their My Access portal at any given time, they almost immediately will see that request, and we'll be able to, from there, action it. So you can also go directly from the email and approve it if that's either way. I mean, is an available option. It will bring you to the My Access portal. So you can see here, Adele is opening the request, looking at the details, saying, okay, I have a user, Alex. Oh, I'm familiar with Alex. I remember he was mentioning that he's starting work today, and I want to make sure I give him access. I need to get to the portal. Adele reviews it, says, okay, approved. You're good to go. Go ahead and access it as you need it. So Adele completes her end of the approval process, submits it, and upon submitting this approval, you might reach out to Alex and say, hey, I approved it for you. Or Alex, as they're waiting for this to kind of happen, they will go into their My Access portal to look at what's going on with that access. So you're going to find that the Alex will then go back to the My Access portal, will look at their request history, and it'll show delivered. So you saw the approval, and you look at the timelines. You know, Adele approved it within 3 minutes, and then almost immediately the access went to a delivered state, and the notification got sent to Alex saying that your access package is delivered. By what that means is that the proper resources in that package were delivered to you. So Alex will, get an email saying, okay, you've received access. And shortly after, Alex will go to the My Apps portal, and upon refreshing, they'll see that now they have a new tab, on-premise application, employee portal. And then once they click on that, they're able to access the employee portal. And here is the on-premise application, which we published via application proxy. Another thing that we've had organizations come to us to help them deploy application proxies to basically allow your on-premise applications to be accessed from Azure Active Directory. And as you can see, the employee portal was granted to Alex. So I kind of wanted to portray that here. Now, another thing that, another item that I wanted to show in this demo is I wanted to also articulate how Alex is requesting access to the marketing package. So earlier I talked about a process where Alex noticed as they went into their teams, you saw they don't have access to the sales and marketing team, right? They were missing it, so they didn't know what they needed to do. As they came back to the access packages, they found the marketing package. So what they did is they requested access. So Alex said, okay, I need to request access. And this particular package does not require an approval. So I have it configured in a way that only if your department is marketing, then you can request it. If I'm part of the IT team and I try to request this package, I won't see it because it's already restricted by the admin. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Access packages allow you to secure that who can request access. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody in the organization can request access to packages that they need. So you saw it was auto approved, a notification was sent, and then Alex got an email saying, hey, congratulations, you're welcome to the sales and marketing group. You're now part of this org. So Alex was able to get that notification. They went into their teams, and all of a sudden they see that the sales and marketing team was added. Now they could collaborate, they can work with their users, and they're basically kind of good to go. So as you can see, a lot of this was pretty much automatically. The only thing was the approval. And again, that's specific to that application because it was more sensitive. The approval was required in order to kind of make that happen. So that kind of concludes this demo of the, I wanted to really kind of portray the end user experience because, the admin side, I definitely show you and articulate. I wanted you to see what that looks like from the end user perspective. We also have a separate access package called employee announcements. I wanted to articulate that out this was automatically applied. I actually have an access package that automatically applied this to the entire organization. I talked about this earlier. So as you can see in the Teams portal, it was automatically provisioned and Alex had access to that team. All right, so access recertification. So here's where, so you grant the access through entitlement management. They have access to the access package, right? So what happens, right? You want to have a process where, let's say that you granted access to this package, and then every 30 days, you request that the access be recertified. So that's where Azure AD access reviews kind of comes into place. I personally really like this, and the reason being is because a lot of times you want to make sure that as organization, when you provide access to different packages and to different resources, you want users to recertify that, hey, do you still need access to this, right? Because if you kind of set it and forget it, you might not know, okay, why do all these people who needed access, say, one time or for a week or 2 weeks, or as they're working on a project, do they really need to have access to this application long term? Most of the time, they don't need access. So you can specify a period and say, okay, every so often, I want to make sure that the access is recertified. So as an end user, if you specify it on the end user level, let's say it's set to 30 days. So every 30 days, the user will get an email saying, hey, we noticed you have access to this marketing package. And perfect example, we saw earlier that the marketing package was assigned to Alex. Let's say that after 30 days, Alex specified, you know what, I don't need access to that team anymore. I'm now part of a different team, or I don't need access anymore. I've completed my role. So they have to recertify. If they don't respond and they don't specify anything, you can have it automatically revoke that access. Or if they respond and say, no, I don't need access, the system will automatically revoke that access. So as you can see, the access certification really helps you to make sure that you're governing that access. You're not just granting them the access and saying, okay, you have access now, great, you'll have it permanently. You want to make sure, again, you recertify. Now, this might obviously be a hindrance for some packages. So again, it's fully customizable, and obviously a lot of organizations, have different needs, and they've come to us to help them. Okay, I want to create these packages, but I want to develop it based on my use cases. So we've helped them really create these access reviews to meet that package, to make sure that the process aligns to what they need for their organization. So there's out-of-box integration with Microsoft Teams to set the notifications to Teams. There's downloadable reports where you can see an application and you can see the access reviews. You also have a way of as administratively reviewing that access. So here you'll see it mentions that these different users, in this case, the FY22 quarterly review, you see the different users who have access. So it gives you some recommendations. It says, okay, go ahead and approve that. I would approve this because the user's been using this package and they last reviewed it less than 30 days ago. This one, it says, go ahead and deny. They haven't logged in 30 days, things like that, right? So it gives you some approvals and review cycles and things like that. So I love this. I mean, identity, this kind of takes that pillar to a next level. You're really governing that access. You assign the packages. Now you're recertifying that access to make sure that, everybody's properly approving it. You can also have it set where a manager has to reapprove your access every 30 days. So you can set it that way where it's not necessarily self-review, but it could be a manager review. So as you can see, there's a lot of custom scenarios, and that's one thing, some organizations have struggled with is there's a lot of tools here, right? There's entitlement management, access reviews. So kind of bringing that all together. So we've helped organizations really create not only the package, not only to understand what resources, but how to create these access recertifications and these access reviews. We've helped organizations create that for them. So here it kind of talks about it, right? Talks about the access reviews, the approval cycle, and reviewing that access, so I've been kind of talking about this pretty heavily. You're managing risk naturally, right? By auditing their access, by recertifying and make sure that they still need access, and make sure that, the administrator is aware and can see that portal, can see the different reviews, who's accessing what, it kind of gives you that control where naturally a lot of ways, like if you have a ticketing system and you're just granting users access, how are you going to automatically, one thing that's always come up is, well, I can assign the packages, I can assign the application, but how am I going to remember every 30 days to go check, right? To make sure that, hey, do they still need access? It's a lot of manual process involved. And quite frankly, it's really difficult and challenging for an organization to be able to have an automated way of recertifying and kind of going through this process. So that's why Access Reviews, I love it because it kind of brings all that together and it kind of allows you to have a process, an automated process in place. So I've talked a lot about automation. That's kind of the modern world we're kind of going into. We want to make sure that we have an automated way of performing these tasks. So this kind of defines it, kind of gives you an idea of lifecycle workflow, job changes. Like I talked about, there's going to be cases where users are part of the sales team and now they're part of the marketing team, right? So you might want to revoke access to a specific access package, and then they want to, grant them access to another one. So if you have an access review cycle, you can, they can say, oh, you know what, that's an old package. I don't need access because I'm actually transitioning to the sales team, or I'm transitioning to a different role in the organization. I don't need access. They put that note in there, and then the access review, what happens is the Azure Active Directory, once it gets that status, will automatically revoke that access if the end user specified that they don't need access any longer. So that's kind of where the access reviews kind of comes into play. So the way they're conducted, you can either do it manually, again, manually created. They can be recurring access. You can also do it for guests. So another portion of access packages, which we haven't really talked about, is external users, right? Your organization might have a lot of external users that access its resources. So you might have a process in place for your guest accounts, right? You might you want to have them recertify access maybe every 7 days, right? You might have more, and you can also control that. There's a lot of controls and things in place. You can also have guests actually request access to specific packages. So when we talked earlier about access packages, it's not necessarily only for your internal users. You might have specific packages for contractors and different guests to be able to request access to, say, a SharePoint site that they want to work on, or to a team that they need to be part of. They can request access, and then you can, as administrator, again, periodically review that and review that access, revoke it accordingly. So you have all that control. The main part here that I want to really articulate is there's a lot of control, right? So you can see how important a lot of these pillars are, and quite frankly, there's not a lot. There's not tools out there. You might have to reach out and have different third-party tools that connect in. That's where Microsoft really did a great job of kind of building all of that into the identity governance suite of products. So give you that control over that governance from all different angles, from your internal users, your guest users, and kind of really give you that control so you can balance between productivity. So we talked earlier about users being productive, right? You want to make sure people get the right access that they need at the right time. So they're more productive. They don't have to wait on a manual process to, grant them access to something. So, but also you want to think about security. While you're securing it because you're governing and you're controlling who can request what, and you're also having these, that's where access reviews comes in. You can govern that access. So, from a security perspective, you can revoke access when something is no longer needed. So we find that really important. Here, I wanted to kind of show you just kind of an admin view, some of the reporting capabilities you have. You could see, you can audit it, you can look at the access reviews, how many packages were reviewed. This shows, say, one was not reviewed. So this kind of gives you an example of like the reviews, and you can see, okay, are guests actually reviewing their access? Are things being ignored? And again, you can specify, as an example, let's say that somebody's on leave or they're not coming back to the organization. They had access to a package and you're not sure if they're going to come back to your organization, and they obviously didn't respond to the notification. Well, you can have the system automatically revoke access if they don't respond. So they don't always have to respond, because if they don't respond, they don't come back with anything, you can have the policy configured in a way where it will automatically revoke access. So from a security perspective, you're safe. And worst case, let's say, what's the worst case if somebody gets revoked access to something they need? When they do come back, they might realize, oh, you know what? I had access to this team before I left. For now, I don't have access anymore. Well, they can see the system revoked access because they never replied. They can go back, re-request access, and they get granted accordingly, and they're off and running. So the impact really is you're kind of controlling that security aspect, and everything's happening automatically in the back end. When they don't respond, they get revoked. When they come back, they re-request access. So we find that is pretty amazing and kind of gives you that granular control. All right, lifecycle workflow. So this is another pillar of Entra Identity Governance. So we talked earlier about automations and user onboarding, and we talked about user offboarding. So lifecycle workflows kind of brings all of that together. So there's a lot of value, right, in lifecycle workflow. So it gives you that automation capabilities to onboard and offboard users into your organization and run these different workflows, right? What a workflow is, and earlier I talked about a user. Let's say they got onboarded from your HR app into Azure Active Directory. Let's say you onboarded them as a disabled account because they're not starting until, say, today is August 2nd. So let's say that today HR started pre-creating 20 accounts, and these employees are not going to start till August 9th, right? So what would you do in that scenario? In that scenario, you'll probably create some on-premise tickets. You'll make sure somebody has a ticket, and you're going to notify them, oh, make sure you do this task, make sure you create a temporary access for them, generate some emails, send them some links. You might set a bunch of different tasks and you put it in the ticket. Well, what's going to happen? Somebody has to go in, they have to spend time on that ticket, they have to make sure they perform those tasks. Oh, and then on the day of their hire, somebody has to go in and enable their account. Well, what happens if that person who was working on that ticket is not there that day? There's a lot of cases where, there's a lot of manual intervention required to perform these. So lifecycle workflows centralizes and brings all of that automation. And we'll see what that looks like. I have actually a demo of a process where an email was sent, and I'll paint the picture shortly when I show the demo, but basically there's a set of tasks that were performed, and the user, when they came in on their day of, they got the information from their manager, they set up their multi-factor, and they were able to log in. So it brings all of that capabilities, and these workflows and tasks can get really creative. Microsoft has allowed you to do what's called custom task extensions, and that's where basically you have custom tasks. So some of the tasks that you could perform are things like adding users to groups, adding, say, to a group which licenses their account automatically, enables their account, generates a temporary access path, set welcome email. Those are some of the built-in tasks, but you can get more creative, right? Let's say you wanted to, you integrate with your ticketing system, right? You want to create a automatic ticket whenever this task is performed. You want to log this in your, third-party ticketing system to make sure that this task actually happened. Well, the custom task extensions allow you to kind of do that. So there's a lot of flexibility with that, and there's a lot of granular control you can have. So you're not necessarily tied to your built-in tasks only. So, onboarding employees. So just as important it is to onboard. So people say, oh, great, onboarding is important. Well, what's also important is offboarding employees, right? So we all, struggle with that at times where users, let's say, that they're no longer going to be part of the organization starting on Friday, right? Again, we're going to go back, we're going to create a ticket, right? We're going to create a ticket. Somebody has to go in and actually action that ticket. But what happens if that person is out that day, or an emergency comes in, the network is down, as an example, right? And they forget, or they're like, oh, I forgot to do this. I had to offboard. Now, all of a sudden, this user still has access when they're no longer a part of the organization. So the lifecycle workflows, based on their leave date, you can specify that on their account. The system will automatically perform a set of tasks on that object, which can include disabling their account, which can include forwarding email, say they're forwarding their email to the manager, delegating access, as an example, to their mailbox. Now, there's some built-in tasks again, but you're not really locked to that. So you can get really creative, and we have organizations that have asked, like, oh, can we create like our own custom what's called Azure Logic apps? And these Logic apps allow you to basically create these custom steps, and based on a specific task and a trigger, it performs a specific task. As an example, depending on how creative you get, maybe you want to, remove them from specific teams as an example, or you want to delegate, like we talked about delegating access. So it really depends on what you do in your offboarding cycle. So what's important here is to basically kind of understand your onboarding and offboarding cycle. So it's not a matter of, okay, let's go and configure all these. You kind of take a step back, and what we've done and how Revanti's helped organizations is we've really kind of sit down with customers and really understand what's your onboarding and offboarding cycle like. What do you do when you onboard a user? What do you do when you offboard a user, right? What happens when employees change teams, right? What are the processes that you perform? So once we gather those details, then we help them develop these lifecycle workflows to make sure that it meets their needs. And if there's anything that's not a capability that can be done, we look at, custom task extensions, as I talked about, to really kind of create something to automate the end-to-end flow. So that's really important, and that's something that we've really helped organizations develop with lifecycle workflows. So here I wanted to kind of quickly show you like a sample view of what the lifecycle workflows kind of looks like. In this example, we have a organization that has quite a lot of different workflows. You can see the tasks. In this case, they're performing quite a lot of tasks, right? They're enabling the account, adding user to the team, sending a welcome email, generating a temporary access pass. There's a lot of things that are being done. Another thing is your welcome email can be really customized, right? You can put specific onboarding and offboarding links in your email, right? So you want to make sure that the employees have that when they start. So the system can automatically do that for you to kind of eliminate you having to manually. Now, imagine if you had to have somebody create this email and send it on their behalf, all of these manual processes, or let's say you have a script on the back end that needs to run and does this. Well, what happens is the script might not run. The system that the script's running on might not, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So automating these tasks, and you can look at the history, you can go to the history and audit, okay, did this workflow run? Did the email get sent out? I actually see that all in my lifecycle workflows pane within identity governance. So I talked about earlier, so I'm going to kind of, here again, we see the whole process, the different tasks and things that are being performed. So here I have a quick little demo for the team. So I wanted to kind of paint the picture again here. So we have this user's manager, new user, and for name, I just call it new user A. A welcome email was configured for that user, and Adele, being the manager for that user, received an email saying that, hey, you have a new employee, new user A. And I'm just going to quickly go back so I can show the team. And this user is essentially starting. Here's the sign-in details for this user, new user A, and we actually created what's called a temporary access pass, because we as an organization in this case require multi-factor. So we, instead of giving the user a password, we gave them a temporary access pass, which essentially honors multi-factor. So the user logged in with that multi-factor capable like temporary access pass. From there, after logging in, the user went through and actually configured their authenticator app. So because the temporary access passes, as the name sounds, is temporary, it only works for a specific period. So you want to make sure that the user sets up another form of multi-factor, right? So the user went in, set up their authenticator app, scanned the QR code. Once they scanned it, they went through the process, and you'll see shortly, on this, the user in the backend is actually setting up their authenticator app. Once the authenticator app is set up, the notification comes in, to approve that request on their phone. Once they approve it and the authenticator app is successfully configured, you'll see here that it says, okay, your authenticator was successfully registered and you are good to go. So it kind of allowed that user, again, automatically onboarded them. The manager gave them the temporary access pass. And as an organization, in this case, you have multi-factor configured. So you want to make sure that the user sets up that second form of multi-factor. They set it up and they were good to go. And then I wanted to show you here a little quick video of the onboarding automatic email. So you'll see here that the user says, "Welcome to the team, user. After logging in, we're excited to have you join our team. Here's some relevant links to help you on your way. Here's your My Apps portal. Here's your access portal." So from here, you can get really creative and customize, and we can, we've helped organizations kind of really develop some of these custom emails. So you can specify things like, here to request access, go to the access portal. Since your organization, we talked earlier about access packages, they'll go to the My Access portal. They'll request access to the applications that they need. And, they're off and running on day one. So as you can see, all of this is kind of happening for the user automatically. There's no manual intervention involved. So there's a lot of things that are happening on the back end for the user. So it really helps kind of bring it all together. So this is just one example. There's a lot of ways to, really customize this. You can get really granular and run other tasks for the user. So I hope this kind of gives you and paints you a good picture of what Lifecycle Workflows really is able to do. And of course, you can get even more creative and perform more tasks accordingly. So the last pillar on we wanted to cover is privileged identity management. This basically, so a lot of organizations have a way of, permanent, one thing that they do, one of their strategies is they just grant access to administrators. So they permanently grant access, saying, oh, you need global admin, I'll go ahead and permanently assign you access. So what privileged identity management allows you to do is, instead of just permanently assigning, you make users eligible for specific admin roles, right? So what happens is you have a team, you can even be your IT team, that not necessarily every single day of their week they need access to be a global administrator. However, they have specific tasks that they need to perform that requires that permission. Well, what happens is you create a strategy, you basically allow them to elevate their account to an administrator. So they go, okay, I will go ahead and elevate my account because I need to perform this task. They get access, and depending on how you configure it, you can specify they get 4 hours, 8 hours, 1 hour, however you want to actually do that. And once they become eligible, they activate their role. Now they have admin permissions, they perform their task, and upon completion, it basically makes them no longer administrators. So again, you have that control and capability, and you're governing your admin side of the house, right? You're making sure you can audit it. You can look at audit trails and see, okay, who is actually elevating their account? So you can kind of understand like what's going on and who's actually, if you find that a user who you're not expecting, you're like, why is this user constantly, elevating their account to a SharePoint admin? They don't really need it all that often. So you might ask some questions. So you're really governing and controlling the admin access. So it's really, really important, right? So like here portrays like giving global admin permission for an unlimited time is definitely not the best approach. You want to make sure you might have cases, again, depending on the use case and depending on the case, if a user truly needs access on a daily basis and they're constantly performing tasks, yes, there are going to be cases where they'll have permanent permission. However, for a majority of the time, they only need access just in time. So essentially, they're just enough access just in time, right? So as you need that access, you'll get it, and as you no longer need it, it gets kind of revoked. So this is kind of what privileged identity management brings all together. User becomes an administrator, they get the permissions depending on the specific interval, and then upon de-escalation, they're back to a regular user. So I personally like that a lot because, like, you don't want your account to have admin permissions when you're not using it, right? If I only need it one time a week and I only need to perform a specific task, or I go in, why should my account have permanent global admin rights at all times? That only opens up the hole for security. If for some reason my account gets phished or hacked or something like that, then what happens is somebody will have global admin and will be able to access and do things in my organization. So Obviously, there are mechanisms to protect against that. There's a lot of security mechanisms, which we didn't cover in today's call, but to kind of prevent those types of attacks from occurring. So, but privileged identity management kind of mitigates that by providing you that, just-in-time access. So you have the access you need, and then you're back to a regular user. So with that being said, I want to thank you everybody for your time. It was a pleasure presenting identity governance. I hope it was helpful. I hope you painted a good picture for everybody. And thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to speaking with you in a further webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Isai, we did actually have some questions come in. If you want to take a minute. Here's can I add custom tasks into a lifecycle workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, you definitely can. We kind of touched on it earlier. You can definitely bring in a lot of these custom tasks into a workflow. So that's where custom task extensions really elevate lifecycle workflows. I think the question was directed around lifecycle workflows. Yeah, you absolutely can. You add them as a custom task in that specific workflow. So in part of that workflow, you add that custom task extension, depending on what it is and how creative you want to get. Once you create it, you're integrated into your tasks, and then depending on how you want it to run, it'll run. So like I mentioned earlier, example is connecting to your ticketing system to update a ticket, to close the ticket, things along those lines. So you absolutely can as part of your lifecycle workflows.
Okay, great. I'm seeing some work coming. Can I restrict access packages so that only specific users / groups can request access to the package?
Yeah, you absolutely can. That's a great question. So earlier we saw that the Alex, was requesting access to the marketing package, right? And you saw only had 2 different access packages that they could request. So you absolutely can, as you're creating these packages for your different teams, whether they're applications or groups, you can specify who can actually request access. So you might have some packages that all users can request, and you might have some packages that only a marketing group member can request. So you absolutely can, and in fact, you want to do that because you don't want to just create all these packages and make it a free-for-all, because that will allow anybody in the organization to request access. And you can also, to that question, you can also restrict, so get external and guest users can request certain packages, or some of them you can only restrict your internal users. So you definitely have that granular control. So that's a great question.
Yeah, I think this is one more. Do you need any third-party tools to deploy the features within Entra that you mentioned in the discussion today?
Yeah, I can probably.
That's also. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Roman.
Thank you, Sai. So in terms of third-party tools, while the integration is possible, right, as mentioned previously, there are APIs available within Azure Active Directory. You can extend the capabilities and actually build upon what's available. You don't necessarily require third-party tools, and that's kind of going back to scenarios where organizations actually looking to, in certain scenarios, to either complement what they have or actually replace what they have with Azure Active Directory capabilities. So you don't necessarily require third-party tools.
Okay. And then personally, I had a question. So you guys went over a lot of information today. It's really hard for organizations to, I can imagine, IT departments within these organizations to keep up to date. So with especially Microsoft's ever-changing security features. So how do you recommend certain team members stay up to date?
That's a great question. So obviously with a lot of new enhancements and continuous improvements that Microsoft conducts as part of Microsoft Entra and Azure Active Directory, when we compare what we had like years ago and what we have now, it's definitely a lot of great capabilities under overall umbrella of Microsoft Entra. And we do understand the challenge around keeping up to date and keeping updated all the environmental aspects as it pertains to different capabilities. That's where we actually come in and help customers to having that knowledge on regular basis. And Revanti has been working with Microsoft for quite some time, specifically like direct channels, different product groups within Microsoft, and kind of constantly having that cadence with Microsoft product managers as well, aside from obviously being a part of technical community. But myself at ESI also, and our team has direct contact with some of those folks within Microsoft, so that we can constantly get that feedback, bring it back to customers, and actually bi-directionally providing that feedback from customers back to like customer experience teams within Microsoft as it pertains to real life observations. Obviously, they are empowered by that feedback. So our job is to constantly bring that back to clients, and also providing services around like security posture improvements and things like that. So
that's great. Now there was one moment during the presentation when ESI talked about being able to see specific users who don't need access to certain pieces within the Microsoft platform, and it made me think: are there any clear and direct cost savings that may come from deploying identity governance with Microsoft Entra?
Yeah, so from cost saving standpoint, it really depends on use cases, right? And I think I touched on it, and yes, I touched on that as well, in terms of really assessing the organization use cases, scenarios that are in place, and helping the organization to evaluate what's currently in place in terms of the objectives that the business working towards, and how those objectives can be achieved with Microsoft Entra Identity Governance and/or other components of Microsoft Entra. So there may not necessarily be direct answer in terms of like putting a number on savings, but specifically from the past observations and statistical data from real life scenarios that we worked with, it's somewhere between 40 to 60% savings that organizations can achieve by implementing what they may already be owning within Microsoft Cloud, or as they move to cloud, thinking about this great capabilities as part of Microsoft Entra Identity Governance. So to kind of put a finer point, really depends on scenarios and use cases that organization will have.
That's great. Well, actually, that's all the questions. Well, the audience and then I had just out of pure curiosity. So thank you guys so much. Great information. Thanks again, everybody, for joining the discussion today. We will be getting the recording out to you as quickly as we can. So really appreciate you engaging with us today. So have a great and wonderful rest of your day, and hope to hear from you all soon. Come back again. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.